Coach, thanks for being with us on our show today.
You're very welcome. It's nice to be here.
You've had a busy day already. We won't get into that, but let's start from the beginning. How did your family of origin influence your coaching success?
Well, I think, as I've often said, parenting is the most important profession in the world, and I think I was very fortunate in my early days of learning many things from my father and mother that helped me shape the philosophy which I had in teaching years later. And there are many things along that line, but I believe more than anything else, it's the foundation set in your early years.
What would you say would be one of the most important things that your father taught you?
I think that possibly is never try to be better than somebody else. Always understand that you'll never know a thing that you don't learn from someone else, but never try to be better than somebody else, but never cease trying to be the best you could be. Yeah, I can remember you saying that that's under your control. The other isn't. And if you get too engrossed, involved, and concerned in regard to things that you have no control, it'll have a negative effect on the things over which you have or should have control.
So focus on that over which you have maximum control, because you have limited control on those other areas.
Correct.
Coach, you talk a lot about truth and honesty. What role has truth played in your life?
Well, I believe that it enables you to have certain serenity or peace, tranquility. As Dad said in one of the sets of threes that he gave me and my brothers when we were in grade school, is don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. And I can remember him saying that if you never lie, if you always tell the truth, you don't have to remember what you say. And if you lie, one lie will lead to another. And I know I never understood that at the time, but somewhere in the hidden recesses of the mind, I recall those things, and I think they are meaningful.
You also talk about another set of threes: no whining, no complaining, no excuses.
That's another set of three that Dad gave us, is don't whine, don't complain, don't make excuses. Just do the best you can, and no one can do more than that.
Would you coach differently today than when you were coaching, and if so, how?
Well, I don't think so. There might be some changes in techniques because of some of the rules that have been different from the time that I taught. But the basic thing, it isn't in getting best results. It isn't the fundamentals. It's how you work with others when it's in a group activity. And I believe that realizing that there's no progress without change. My basic philosophy, I don't believe in change hardly at all.
You were a good basketball player, in fact, really good. What are some of the principles you learned as a player that have influenced your coaching style?
Hard work, much as anything else, and get to the point where you enjoy what you're doing, but you must work hard at it. I think those eventually later became the cornerstones for my pyramid.
We watched you for many years as the coach at UCLA, yet you referred to yourself as a teacher. What's the difference?
In reality, there is no difference, in my opinion. All a coach is a teacher. You're teaching more things than just, however, the subject matter. Like I taught English for many, many years, and prior to coming to UCLA, and you're teaching not quite the same things in the English classroom as you are on the basketball court or the baseball diamond or the football field or something, because there's other things you have to get across more that are extremely valuable. You're not working together so much in an English class, but you must be working together in some sport of that sort. So I think there's much to be attained and acquired from teaching activities in sports that you don't get in the classroom for teaching the solid subjects. But you learn that you must have a program, you must have a program that you follow, you must have a plan for each day's activities, just in the classroom or on the court, whatever it might be.
You also were at UCLA coaching for 15 years, I believe, before you won a national title. Do you think that in today's college environment, they would allow you 15 years to produce a championship team?
Well, it depends on a lot of other things. There are certain reasons why you couldn't. I've said, in my case, when I've asked how come it took you 15 years to win a national championship, and I said, well, I'm a slow learner, but you'll notice when I learn something, I have it down pretty good, and that's the important thing. I think that if you conduct yourselves in the proper manner and those under whose supervision you are understand that you're working for more than just the outcome as far as the score of a game, I think that you're going to be okay in the vast majority of places. Some, maybe not.
Based upon your pyramid of success, I want to throw out some words, not all of them, and you just comment on some of those words. Self-control.
Keeping your emotions under control so that you'll be able to execute whatever you're doing near your own particular level of competency.
Poise.
Being yourself. I've coined my own definition of poise. It's just being yourself.
Adaptability.
Realizing that situations change and you must change according to the situation.
Intentness.
Keeping focused on your objective.
Cooperation.
Being considerate of others and know you're not alone in anything, that there's others with you in one way or another. And when you give, you receive.
Skill.
Being able to execute not only properly but quickly.
Alertness.
Being observing everything that's going on around about you and the things to do as well as the things not to do.
What would you consider your greatest responsibility as a coach?
I believe as time went by, maybe I didn't realize it so much in my earlier days, but as time went by, I think my great responsibility is to teach those under your supervision the value of an education, and to know that education is going to be very meaningful for all their lives, and sport is going to be meaningful for only a comparatively short part of their lives. And but they can help you in the other things that are going to be meaningful in the later years. But I believe that is the main responsibility of teaching your youngsters to be considerate of others and to know that hard work will bring desirable results, maybe within the limits of your own particular abilities.
Mm-hmm. In your humble opinion, what would you consider as your greatest strength as a coach?
I thought, but it's been that a number of times. I think that it's hard for a person to recognize and analyze their own weaknesses, but I believe one of my strengths was organization, being able to accomplish things in a minimum amount of time. I think others have said that too about me, and I sort of believe that was one of my strengths, and then getting my youngsters to work together for the welfare of the group rather than just individual statistics. I believe I was very successful in that.
You coached a lot of years, and as a coach, what would you say was probably one of the most difficult decisions you ever had to make?
I think that when you have to discipline someone under your supervision, or you have to decide who's going to get the letters at the end and who's going to be your traveling squad, and who should be playing at this certain time, and to make this proper substitution adjustments you have to make. Those are, when you have to make a decision that you know is going to affect others, those are the difficult decisions you have to make. And sometimes we don't realize how much a certain decision you're going to make is going to affect others.
As a coach, if you were to ask some of your former players, let's just say all of them, I know there's a lot of them, to describe you in one word, what do you think they would say?
I hope they would say that I was very considerate of all of them. I hope they'd say that I loved them all, although there are many things they might have done that I didn't like. I'd hope they'd say that. But
consistency might be one word?
Yes, in spite of the fact that some say that consistency is the last refuge of those who have no imagination.
That's very good.
I think that you have to be consistent in so many ways.
In your first year as head coach at Indiana State, you and your team were invited to participate in the national tournament, but you refused to go. What happened?
Well, I had one a colored player on my team, and they were not permitted to play in it at that particular time, so I refused to accept the invitation to play in it since he wasn't permitted to, even though he was probably on my traveling squad, he probably played the least amount of time of anyone on my team, but still, he was with us all the time, and he was a part of the team, and I wouldn't go without him.
What were the results, the fallout, the repercussions of that decision that you made?
The very next year, we were invited again, and this time they permitted him to come with some restrictions. He couldn't stay in the hotel where we were staying. He couldn't have his meals in the dining room, but he could have his meals in the hotel provided we had a private room. And I refused again, but I was beseeched by the NAACP and his parents and some others that it might be a breakthrough. And so I relented, and we went. He stayed with a colored minister and his wife, but was the hotel for our meals, and we did have him in a private room. We had no problem with him. He was accepted. Of course, he didn't get to play very much. Had he been a star player, it might have been, I don't know that it would have been, but it could have been different. And we had more trouble on the way driving from Terre Haute to Kansas City, stopping in some places maybe to eat where they wouldn't let him come in and eat, so I wouldn't let anybody go. We'd just go someplace else. And would not make any big deal of it. Say, I feel that, some bologna and crackers and cheese would be better anyway for all of us. So we go to get something else, and our other players would accept it. But anyway, I think it did serve as a breakthrough. People were right, and about a few years later, an all-colored team won the championship there.
How many years ago was that?
That was in 1948.
1948. That's the year I was born.
56 years ago.
Let's fast forward a couple of decades now, and we're in the era of the 60s and 70s. It was a tumultuous time, very confusing time for a lot of people, and you had some extremely strong-willed players. That's how I will describe it. How did you manage those times and those kinds of players?
Well, you have to change with the times. There's no question about that, but you can't change your basic philosophy. And for example, one great player, one of the greatest players I ever had, and one of the greatest playing the game, said I didn't have the right to determine whether or not he could wear a beard or a mustache or let his hair go extremely long. And I said, no, I don't have that right. I just have the right to determine who's going to play, and we're going to miss you. And
very subtle.
Yes,
very powerful.
And he got taken care of, and there was no problem. And he's often been interviewed. He's been asked, "Do you think Coach would have stood up for it?" And he said, "Well, I got taken care of, didn't I?" And so I think I tried to teach my players, for example, I'm not going to try to tell you what religion you should have or what your politics should be. Have something, believe in it, have some reasons to stand up for it, but please stay open-minded. That's all I ask.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we will join legendary coach John Wooden to talk about some of the principles of leadership that have really shaped his life and the lives of so many people. We'll be right back.
Leadership Track is a leadership development resource for leaders who want to grow their leadership ability and influence. The primary focus of our resource menu is self-leadership. If you're ready for the adventure, log on to leadershiptrack.com. You'll find Leadership Track Televised, a 30-minute interview with successful leaders who share what they've learned on their leadership journey. Leadership FAQs, a brief missive that provides insight into a myriad of leadership topics like change, teamwork, and conflict resolution. Leadership Track is also available for on-site training and keynote events. Share the wealth of information with your entire team. Visit leadershiptrack.com today. Empowering leaders to live life on purpose.
Welcome back to Leadership Track. We're with legendary coach John Wooden. We're talking about some of the issues of leadership that formed his own life and the lives of so many other people. We're talking about his past, his teams, his presence, what his plans are for the future. Coach, thanks for being with us on the show. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you is this. You had a lot of stars on your team, but how did you handle that whole issue of being a star with regard to being a team player as well?
Well, my basic philosophy at the very beginning is that we're working this together, and I have in my pyramid team spirit, and that is to realize that each individual must make the effort to be concerned about the team first. I want their individual abilities to be put to use for the welfare of the team, not for themselves. I once heard team spirit defined as in willingness to lose oneself in the group for the good of the group. And I used that but didn't like it particularly well. But finally, by changing one word, I changed the word willingness to eagerness. Sometimes we're willing to do something we really don't want to. And if we don't want to do it, you're not going to have the enthusiasm necessary to execute your own particular level of competency. I changed that to an eagerness, and I thought it worked a little better. And the best method you have of controlling that is the bench. They all like to play, and if they don't work together as a group and they're playing two individuals, they put them on the bench, and they usually come around because they all like to play.
You've achieved so many levels of success as a coach by anyone's standards. So how would you, John Wooden, define success?
Well, I defined it in 1934 to try to help me become a better teacher. And I thought a lot of things about it, and I remembered what my father tried to teach about never trying to be better than somebody else, but always never cease trying to be the best you could be. And I remembered something that a high school professor had when we talked about success. And I ran across a very simple verse that said, "At God's footstool to confess, a poor soul knelt and bowed his head. I failed," he cried. "The Master said, thou didst thy best. That is success." And I believe that is true. And from those things, I define success in 1934 as peace of mind attained only through self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to do the best of which you're capable. And you're the only one who will know that.
How would you comment on the phrase that some people use where you have to give 110%?
I would say there's no way you can give 110%, and there's no such thing as an overachiever. No one ever did more than they're capable of doing, and 100% is perfection, so there's no way you can give 110%. And that's my feeling about it, and occasionally when I hear that, I sort of jokingly want to tell them, "Oh, now how you really give 110%, or how can you do something you're not able to do?" So that's my feeling.
I also heard you say several years ago that we are all underachievers, just to varying degrees.
Oh, I think that's true. No one is perfect, but some don't do nearly what they're capable of doing, and it's a question of making the effort to do the best of which you're capable.
Now, your players, and you had so many talented players, they accepted their roles, and in fact, they had no choice. They had to accept their role, and you insisted on discipline. What role has discipline played in your coaching success?
Well, it's a very important role. That's what helps bring about team play, and it also helps bring about the improvement of the individual. They have to discipline themselves to work the way they should. They have to discipline themselves to do the things they should do that's going to enable them to execute near their level of competency. There's just no question it's extremely important in almost everything.
How do you walk that fine line of being a disciplinarian without being portrayed as an ogre?
Well, it's not easy. And there are those that are portrayed as an ogre that have been successful in the eyes of others, because too often success is determined in athletics by the final score. But I don't think that's necessarily the indication of success. I should put not a true indication of success. Maybe I should put, but you take a coach like Lombardi in football, a great coach, no question, got great results about it, and but yet, like one of his players, a great player that he had, said, "Does Coach Lombardi treat you all the same?" He said, "Oh yes, he does. He treats us all like dogs." And then there's a very, very successful and outstanding coach, and Bobby Knight, that you've all heard of, I'm sure, and got great results. But he's more of the driver. They're more of the dictator type. But you can get results in different ways. You have to be yourself.
If we were interviewing Bobby Knight, we would have this chair glued to the floor. So it would stay put.
Well, that's he's got a lot of
style. Let's put it
recognition
there.
on that. That's true.
Given the opportunity, is there anything in your coaching career that you would do over if you had the opportunity to do it?
There are many things, because I learned as the years went by. If I go back to my early years, I wish that I had known what I learned, the things I learned in my later years than my earlier years. But of course, that's impossible. Yes, but the mistakes I made, I were not of the heart, and I know that I made mistakes, and some of the disciplines that I had to do in my early years, some of the rules that I had, that I didn't see a gray area. It was either this or that, and I think I made some mistakes in that. I learned from it and didn't make them again. But there are things of that sort that, had I known better, I wouldn't have done it, but I didn't.
Your commitment to truth, again, they're very honest about who you are and what you've done, and not try to whitewash it. Those are great lessons to learn.
Well, it's like anything else, many things. A gambler, an alcoholic, they're diseases. But they can't be overcome unless you admit it and see it and be truthful about it.
If you could say one thing to America's leaders today, and they're in so many different fields, corporations, but let's say the people leading our nation, but leaders in general, what would you say to them?
Be open-minded.
Be open-minded.
That's right.
That takes a person committed to the truth, though, to be open-minded.
I would think so. Absolutely. Sometimes we don't listen enough, and we get, well, let's see, we get too stubborn about some things. We just believe what is that? What someone said. Let me think. Stubbornness we deprecate, firmness we condone. The former is my neighbor's trait. The latter is my own. But sometimes we don't recognize that. We've got to stay open-minded and always be learning.
Why am I not surprised you had a poem for that as well?
I don't know.
What is the one piece of advice that you wish you would have been given when you started your coaching career?
Oh, I know there are many things. To say one piece of advice would be just impossible to pick out one, because I knew so little, and maybe thought I knew more than I did. But I know some of the mistakes I made, for example, was having too many rules that I thought. And I learned, for example, in my early years, I had a lot of rules and a few suggestions. As time went by, I had less rules and more suggestions. And I learned not to say what the penalty would be for a rule, because there can be different circumstances involving it, and for different individuals, the same action should be different and one for another for various reasons. And I think I learned things like that along the way that helped me.
What would you most like to be remembered for?
As one that was considerate of others.
That's great. You were a learner. I know you read a lot. You write a lot. That would keep a person young, curious, adventuresome. I mean, life is an adventure to you.
Well, of course it is.
You're probably busier now than you were when you were teaching.
I really am. I sometimes think I should go back to UCLA and get a little rest.
Some people retire, others refire. You have
So
refired. You have refired. Now, the John R. Wooden course on leadership, which we're going to put up on the screen for folks, www.johnrwoodencourse.com. Tell me a little bit about that, how that came to be.
Well, Mr. Guerin could tell you a lot more about that
Len
than
Guerin.
I do. But it's because of the fact that we visited and talked about how leadership in sports could also be applicable to business in various things. And Lynn, got to work on that and brought up many ideas. And I myself have learned from that. I believe it can be, which I didn't understand quite so much earlier. And I think the course is applicable to anyone in almost any profession.
Coach, you've had such an impact on so many of us over the years. You've been a mentor to myself. I was a little kid watching you coach basketball, and we all wanted to be around you. We all wanted to get inside your head and figure out some of that good wisdom. I appreciate so much you being on this show, the impact you've had on countless, hundreds of thousands of people, and that's no exaggeration. It's been absolutely tremendous. And tomorrow you're 94 years of age.
Yeah, correct.
That is incredible. When I grow up, I want to be like you. And we would love to have you back on your 100th birthday. That is, if I'm still around. We'd love to have you back. Thanks for being on our show today. It's been a pleasure to have you here. And thank you for joining us on Leadership Track. We'll see you next time.